In today's episode of Today in World War II, March 5th, the Soviet Politburo blames the victim to justify their own murder. The Soviets keep up pressure on the Finns in Viipuri. The RAF begins the Battle of the Ruhr. The very first Allied jet fighter makes its maiden flight, its debut, let's say. Chuck Yeager, very famous Air Force pilot who goes on to be involved in the space program, is shot down, but is saved by the French resistance, and the Soviets cut off another German army in the northern, near the Baltic Sea, at the end of the war. Let's get started. On March 5th, 1940, the Soviet Politburo decided that it needed to shame the victims of the soon-to-be murdered victims of their totalitarian regime by declaring that the Polish officers in captivity were enemies of the Soviet Union. And as I said, Stalin had already signed off on this yesterday, but now it was publicly stated that the death sentences were ordered for all of them, and the justification was that, well, if we release them back into the population, they're going to organize resistance movements against the Soviet occupation. So we need to murder them. That's the best way to do it. Let me tell you something. You never want to be an enemy of the Soviet Union or Russia for that matter, and because bad things happen. And so, uh, as someone who spent a lot of time over there, speak the language, 30 plus years experience over there, they're not your friends. All you right-wing people that think Putin is your friend, he ain't your friend. Okay. Just saying. What is, I'm your friend. Okay. And rather than sucking up to them, you should suck up to me by by subscribing to my channel. That's really the key to a good life is subscribe to my channel, click the bell. YouTube will notify you whenever I drop a new video, and you'll be doing a good deed in helping me get this content out to more people. Thank you. Staying in March 40th, excuse me, staying in March 5th, 1940, lots of heavy casualties were being inflicted, as always, by the Finns against the Soviets. Despite this, they were driven to take Viipuri, the provincial town city, and on the Karelian Isthmus. The Soviet forces captured more islands in Viipuri Bay, putting more pressure on the city of Viipuri. Uh, in light of those new advances, the Soviet Union on the peace, the diplomatic front, renewed its peace offer, but this time it was more seriously considered by Finland because they saw they were hanging on by their fingernails. And so you have a dual game going on here. On the one hand, you've got the military thing going, you've got them trying to take Viipuri, Finns are trying to save it, trying to resist. While all that's going on, then you've got the diplomatic war where the Soviets and the Finnish government are negotiating. Uh, Obviously, the Soviets have their end game. They want to have the Finns accept as draconian terms as possible. The Finns want to salvage a draw from the war, let's put it that way, to where they can keep as much of their freedom and their territory as possible. It's all back and forth, and in these last few days of March, or that's left in the war, this is where we're at. In fact, the diplomatic warfare is almost more important. I'll tell you what's always important is if you will like the video and you will leave a comment. Okay, by doing that, that equals engagement. The YouTube algorithm only sees two things, engagement or no engagement. If it sees engagement, it rewards. It's like Pavlov's dog, where, if a dog hears a bell, the saliva starts to flow because it's going to get fed some meat. In the same way, the algorithm, its saliva starts to flow if it sees engagement. So it immediately wants to ring that bell, or in this case, show my content to more people. So it's important that you do so if you like my content. On February 5th, 1943, British bombers attacked the Krupp works at Essen, Germany. That in of itself is not that big of a deal. I mean, the RAF was attacking, Germany almost every day, every night. But this was actually the very first attack on in the Ruhr industrial region. This was the heartland of German industry. This is where most of their factories were. And the Allies, especially the RAF, made this a major part of their targeting, and the Allies called this the Battle of the Ruhr. Um, just spoiler alert here, they didn't actually completely finish the job until the troops were on the ground. But, you got to do something. You got to attack what you can attack during the war, and this was part of that. On March 5th, 1943, the British, were also making technological advances in the field of jet warfare, jet engines, and the very first Gloucester Meteor jet aircraft that the Allies had, it made its first flight. Behind in the We were way behind the Germans on this. The Germans made the German 262 jet fighter had been flown 2 years previously, so they were doing a lot of catching up here. But it did finally go operational during the war, but it really didn't play much of a role. They were a little bit late, too late, a dollar short, as they say. But it was noteworthy that this was the first Allied jet fighter that ever made a flight with jet engines. On March 5th, 1944, very famous pilot Chuck Yeager, who fought obviously as a fighter pilot in World War II in the European theater. He would later go on to fame and fortune, being involved in the space program. Well, on this date, on his eighth mission, he was shot down over France, and he was not taken in captivity. The Germans didn't get him. He was saved by the French resistance. The resistance forces in Belgium, Holland, uh, France, they did an amazing job of getting down pilots. They couldn't get them all, but they got a lot. And they had these very intricate escape routes that were usually led through Spain to get them out. And Yeager was involved in that. And they put their lives on the line. If they were found harboring or helping Allied airmen to escape, then it was certain death, concentration camp, torture, and those brave, usually unknown resistance fighters, they had the poopy end of the stick in this war. Let me tell you something like that. So, not enough attention is paid to them, and I wanted to use Chuck Yeager's example as a way to talk more about this and just what they did to help the Allied war effort. It wasn't just blowing up a few bridges every now and then and waiting for the Allies to invade Normandy. No, not at all. And finally, on March 5th, 1945, the Soviet 19th Army reached the Baltic coast. They cut off another German army, in this case, the German Second Army in Pomerania, Germany. This was at this end of the war, the Soviets were like continuing to repeat what the Germans had done in 1940 when they swept through the Ardennes forest, and you had Rommel, 7th Division, leading the battle to get to Dunkirk, marooning the French and the British there, and having the Brits and the French having to be rescued in the glorious failure or the glorious win of Dunkirk to evacuate their armies. Well, the Germans had to do that a couple times, because the Soviets were moving so fast and so quickly, and the by this time, I mean, it was unfair, really, if you think about it, because Americans had sent so many trucks over there, and they had motorized the uh, Soviet army. And at this time of the war, with the exception of the tanks, the German army was a horse army, and they could not retreat fast enough. They couldn't resist enough to where the Soviets were constantly encircling them at this from 43, 44, now into 45. We saw this happen more and more and more. And this was just another case. So, another example that we don't get enough credit in the Soviets' eyes, Russian eyes now, of how much our aid helped them to become a better army, especially towards the end. But that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate it, and I will see you tomorrow.